Hi, this is Dr. J.D. Pendleton, and this is my husband, Dr. John Pendleton, and we are back with Maranatha Minutes Genesis Chapter 37. We're moving right along, and we actually did Chapter 37 outside, but the wind was blowing, hit the microphone, and you couldn't hear it. So we're going to come back in the house here, and we're going to re-record it. Sorry about that. So we got a lot of subjects we want to cover today, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. So go ahead and open your Bible to Genesis Chapter 37. Now John's going to be Joseph, and I'm going to play the other parts. We're going to kind of switch positions here. He's going to be the lead man here. Now Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bela and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel, remember Israel's Jacob, God named Jacob Israel. So now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that his father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he had told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them,
"Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf arose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it."
His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" They hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers.
"Listen,"
he said.
"I had another dream, and this time the sun, moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me."
When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. The father must have been a little bit worried about Joseph putting on a little bit of airs. Maybe he thought he was acting like he was better than the rest of them. Now in Genesis 37:12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. Well, we know where Shechem is. That's where Dinah got raped. And then they ended up taking everything and killing all the men. So now they can freely graze their flocks there now. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them."
"Very well,"
he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied,
"I am looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing the flocks?"
"They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. They plotted to kill their brother. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of those cisterns," a deep well, "and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him, from them and to be able to take him back to his father. So Reuben tried to save him. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing. The bullying went a little too far, didn't it? And they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. So it must have been pretty deep.
Yeah, deep enough. Good Lord.
As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. They were on the trade route there. And they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, so it probably took a little while to get the caravan in view. You can imagine how far they could see him coming. So when they finally showed up that evening, they stopped him and talked to them. So when the Midianite merchant came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. They took him as a slave to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father, Israel, and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and he mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. And that brings us to Genesis chapter 38. So what do you think of this about brothers and sisters?
Well, one thing that people have said that these are just made up stories. The thing about the Bible, not all the stories in the Bible are in there for you to emulate. They're in there for our teaching and our understanding. And this was definitely a bad thing that they did. What it says in the New Testament is God works bad into good. And he used this situation to get Joseph where he needed him to be. This was not just a stranger. These people, it was a mixture of people.
It was family, but...
It was family. The Ishmaelites were a son of Abraham by Hagar. The Midianites were a son of Abraham by Keturah. And they were basically third cousins. In the traveling to Egypt and along the routes that they traveled on, there were wild lions. There were people, bandits, and other things that were trying to do them in or take their money or whatever.
Yeah, steal their livestock. I mean, you know.
So they had to have defense. And
it would have been a spice route. If the caravans were coming through there, it was probably a spice route as well. You know, the trade route, I mean.
So this family gathering that happened here with third cousins, and then they took their brother to Egypt, where God needed him to be, but not necessarily in this way.
Yeah, well, God makes good out of the bad.
Yes.
And so that's one of the ways that we know that the Bible can be trusted, because we know if you were going to write a fantasy tale, I don't think you would write so many things that are so bad.
Well, you try to hide those in your family.
Yeah,
different
the family,
people that are having
family.
issues. You really don't talk about those outside the family. But here it's plainly stated, this happened, they hated their brother, and they planned to do away with him. And they talk about all of the people agreeing with it, except the one brother, and then he tried to come and rescue him, and the body wasn't there. So evidently they had told him, or maybe he didn't know that they sold him to Egypt. But whatever they did, the body wasn't there, and they did try to cover it up by doing a ruse. Jacob, Israel, wasn't the same after this. And he mourned and mourned and mourned. But the story as we proceed, we'll see what happens.
Well,
blessings to you.
Yeah, but
God
thank
can
you for
work
joining us.
good out of the bad.
Now just remember that if you're going through troubles and trials right now, have you lost a loved one? Are you going through a divorce? Who's hurt you? Is your family like Joseph? Or whatever your trials are, someone's in the hospital, just pray to God about it. And I'm sure if you give it a couple of weeks, a couple of days, a couple of hours, you're going to find that God makes good out of the bad. You're going to see the rainbow there somewhere. Just look outside and look at the birds and try to enjoy your day, because tomorrow's always a new day, and God gave us that for a reason. He gave us day and night for a reason, and tomorrow's always a new day with no mistakes in it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's still plenty of room for mistakes in that day. We're going to make them, but we're going to live through it. And with Christ and hope, we're going to live through it even easier. Whatever your pain is, you can do it through Christ. This is Dr. Jamie Pendleton and my husband, Dr. John Pendleton, and we want to thank you for joining us with another episode of Maranatha Minutes.
Blessings.
Blessings.